Hey, what's up? It's Jared with Ditch Auto, and today I wanted to talk about the Sony RX100 VI. This is 1 year later. I've had the camera for a full year, so I'm back here to talk about my experiences having used the camera for a full year. And of course, when I put out my original videos talking about the camera, I had some kind of apprehensions about the camera because there were a few things that were different about it that I wasn't really a fan of. And they haven't really changed too much, but I'm also super used to the changes now. The first being that the camera doesn't have any internal ND. So without any internal ND, it's very hard to get like good exposed shots with camera settings that I want, because the typical lens on the RX100 would only stop down to an f11, and that's just not, you just can't stop down enough to cut out enough light, so you end up shooting at like 1/1000th of a second or higher for your photos, and a lot of times video I'm shooting at like 1/500th of a second, and my video's looking more like smartphone footage than it is footage that came off of a camera like this. And then of course the big change, which was going from a 24 to 70 with an f2 f-stop to a 24 to 200 millimeter with a variable aperture f-stop that I think goes from 2.8 to 4.5. And so there were some changes there that I didn't know if I was going to be on board with. And then a couple days or weeks later, when Sony came out with the RX100 Mark IV-A, or the VA, or whatever you want to call it, I was even more confused. But I'm glad that I made the choice that I made, and I've used this camera quite a bit. So let's kind of talk a little bit about it. So I keep the camera in my low pro case here. It's a very inexpensive case that's held up really well, and I've been using this case with the camera for like the last 4 or 5 years with the different versions of the camera. I'll make sure to link to it below. It's got a zipper pouch on front, which I put an extra micro SD card and a battery in. And then it's got the main body area here. And then it has a belt loop, because I'll like wear this kind of dad mode style on my belt because I always want to have this camera ready to go. And so this bag is held up really well, and it's just been a great bag. And it's super small. I also, this is my everyday carry camera, and so I keep this camera in my laptop bag, and having it inside that little pouch bag keeps it from getting scratched and bumping up against other things in my camera bag, or even in my vehicle when it's in my center console or something like that. So the Sony RX100 Mark VI is a great little camera, and it has some neat features and some things that I want to talk about in this video. So before I jump right in, I'm going to talk a little bit about this filter that I have on the front of the camera, because people are always asking me, what in the heck is on the front of your RX100? Because the RX100 does not have filter threads, so you typically can't mount anything on the front of the camera. But I have one mounted on the front of the camera. I have a variable ND on here, and I used the LensMate adapter in order to do that. LensMate made an adapter that adheres to the face of the camera so that you can screw on your typical 52 millimeter filters. And in this instance, I went with a Hoya 52 millimeter variable ND filter, which is really one of the only options available, because it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot available for the 52 millimeter thread when it comes to variable adjustment and stuff like that. But you can use any 52 millimeter filter thread on the front of the camera. And this helps me out a lot in getting the types of shots that I want to get, being able to keep the camera settings around where I want them to be so that I can get those shallow depth of field on the photos or the videos that I'm shooting, and actually just do the darkening on the face of the camera instead of it handling it inside the camera. I actually like having the variable ND over having the single ND internally on the camera anyways, so I'm not even upset anymore that the camera doesn't have that feature. The only thing that I'm upset about is having to adapt something onto the face of the camera by adhering it to the face of the camera, which I've had no problems. It's been absolutely great, and it would come off super easy if I wanted to take it off. It actually does stay onto the camera really well. And then I could really easily just remove the whole attachment itself and put it in the case that it came in if I wanted to, but I just leave it on the camera all the time. I haven't had any problems with it yet. So let's talk a little bit about the camera and why you would need a point and shoot in 2019 anyways. Point and shoot cameras, you know, people say like, oh, I don't need those because I have a smartphone. Well, why would you want a point and shoot camera or spend any money on a point and shoot camera when we have iPhone 10s and Galaxy S10s and Pixel phones and all that stuff? Well, you're still not going to get the type of image out of a smartphone that you would get out of a nicer point and shoot camera. Now, if all you have is a point and shoot camera that's a couple $100, your smartphone's probably going to do a better job than it. But if you're going to spend a bit more money and get a nice point and shoot camera, it's going to be able to do a lot more than your smartphone can do. Now, I'm often utilizing this camera to get B-roll video, to get some other shots, alternative shots, and also to get some photos that I want to use on social media. And I just don't want my photos to look like smartphone photos. You know, you can't get that cool shallow depth of field unless you use portrait mode, and portrait mode on the cameras really still isn't that good on our smartphones because it just does weird things and it just doesn't look natural yet. So using a camera like this is going to solve that problem. And then of course a camera like this is super lightweight, easy to carry around and use. It's a great vlogging camera. It has a better sensor, a much better sensor than your smartphones are going to have. And so it's just a better all-around option than shooting photos with your smartphone, unless you just don't need that. But for me, I do need that. So hence this camera. All right, so we are set up. At least I think we're all set up. And we have a little bit more to do inside of the trailer, just in getting everybody situated, getting their stuff put where they want it. But the outside of the trailer is set up, so let me give you a tour. So the camera has some improvements to it. Of course, that 24 to 200 millimeter zoom range I've actually come to really enjoy, and especially being on the trip that I've been on with my family for the last couple of months, going to national parks and state parks and staying in beautiful places, being able to zoom into 200 millimeters and not have to do that digitally has been really nice. And with this camera, you can zoom all the way into 200 millimeters optically. You don't have to worry about clear image zoom or anything like that, which definitely can degrade your image a bit, or even having to crop in and post. The camera with 200 millimeters gets you up close and personal to pretty much everything. And the variable aperture stepping up from an f2.8 to an f4.5 as you zoom in, though annoying, is not the end of the world for me. And since I have the variable ND on here anyways, I can adjust and make changes on the fly as needed, and it doesn't really bother me anymore. Also, there's an update to the pop-up EVF here. One-step pop-up, you no longer have to pop it out. I think I talked about that in my initial video. And then one step pushing it back, and it closes, shuts down the camera, and it's ready to be stowed away. Very cool. I love that, and I use that quite often when shooting photos. When shooting video and photos too, I'm using the articulating screen, which has a full articulation all the way up, which this is what made it popular originally, because it was a great vlogging camera because you can see the screen and keep your shot composed relatively well. So that's something that this camera's been really well known for, but it articulates all the way around, completely face down, which has been great for those times when I need to just, you know, use my arm as a boom pole to get the camera as far away as possible. I can articulate the screen in any direction and really just see what I'm doing. And I absolutely love the display on this camera too. Is an upgrade over previous years. The resolution on the display is great. Yeah, the playback for watching your video or your photo that you just took just looks great. Everything is really good on this camera as far as the display goes. Wish it was a little bit bigger, but it's still just overall is just a great display on the camera, and it is improved over the previous year's versions. Nothing really too much has changed with the flash. I believe something small did change with it, maybe the guide number or something like that. But I typically don't use the flash on this camera unless I'm bouncing it off the ceiling and lighting my subject that way. I just don't like the way that the flash looks when it shoots light straight at a person. So I love the fact that they did keep the way that this tucks away, because I'll just hold it back like this and bounce that light off the ceiling to light my subject. And I think it gives a much better looking light than you would get if you just blew them right in the face with it. The button layout on the camera I do really like. They tried to make it as much like shooting with a higher end Sony as possible by giving you as many buttons as they could based on the small amount of real estate that they have here. I did change, and I do change my button layout a little bit, and that's part of one of the top settings videos that I put out about a year ago about this camera. So if you're interested in the way that I've kind of reconfigured the camera and changed some of the settings, definitely check out that video. I'll make sure to link to it and put it up in the card above so that you can get access to that. The ergonomics of the camera are one of the challenges. It is a very tiny camera and it's hard to hold on to. So I have these Peak Design pucks on here for two different reasons. The number one reason is because I do often use like a strap when I'm carrying the camera. And so I'll put the camera in a Peak Design strap, which these are good for. But also I have the Sony grip on here, which gives your index finger something to hold on to, but I'll also put that Peak Design puck in between my fingers there. And so when I'm holding on to the camera, I've got my finger on the grip, I've got the puck in between my index and my middle finger, and if the camera slips out of my hand a little bit, it really just kind of hits my hand. It's like, ooh, and it catches it, which is nice, because if you didn't have the grip or this, the camera just really easily slips. And if you've used a camera like this that has an all-metal body for vlogging and just being active and stuff like that, maybe you get a little sweaty or a little sweaty palms or something like that, the camera can easily slip. Having the little leather grip, having the Peak Design puck there definitely has saved my butt several times in those little instances where maybe my hand gets bumped and the camera just it just does that. It just does that and that's it, instead of goes flying out of my hand. This camera is durable considering everything that it's doing, but it's very breakable as well. I've had the display scratch super easy on the back on previous versions of the camera. I do have a protector on this one, which I'll link to, even though it adds a little bit of glare to the display. Gosh, after deciding not to put one on one of my previous cameras and having scuffs all over the back, I had to make a change and I put one back on it. But having these grips and stuff on there definitely help as well in just keeping the camera safe and keeping it from getting damaged, because I did damage one camera. I think something, maybe a piece of sand or something got in there. I'm not really sure. Maybe it was just moisture got in there and the camera was acting really weird. And then I do know someone else who has one who had some major issues with their RX100 Mark IV, I believe. And so for me, I just want to be as safe as possible, because this is not a cheap camera, so you don't want to treat it like a cheap camera. You need to make sure that you're protecting it. So aside from the outside and kind of internal features of the camera, I don't want to talk too much more about that. I just want to talk more about how I use it. The camera shoots beautiful images. You know, whether you're looking for that shallow depth of field, which you can get with this camera, or you're trying to shoot something more high speed because it's a sporting event or something like that, having that up to 200 millimeter gives you more options to get in closer to the action. And then this camera just shoots so fast that you can capture that action and whatever's going on. So your kids' sporting games, maybe you want something that is more pocketable or purseable that you can keep without having to go with a bigger camera. This is the camera for you. If you're wanting something to go and shoot landscapes and be able to have a good range of zoom and have some of those professional settings that a DSLR style camera or mirrorless camera would have, but you want something more pocketable or purseable, this camera is definitely going to be the one that you want. And it's the one that I keep going to easily, because I've been in so many situations with my family traveling full-time for the last almost 2 months that this camera is just easily what I go to, because it has the professional settings that I want. The options are there and it's easy and pocketable and it doesn't take up much space, and I can mount it on the hip like the dad that I am. So with that said, it also shoots amazing 4K video. It has S-Log 3. It has some pro features in there that I use on my higher end cameras. So it's very easy for me to match the footage out of this camera to the other cameras so that it looks like I'm using the same camera system all the way across, except I'm just using something small and pocketable here. which is really nice to be able to have that, because you never know when you're out and you might have, if you're like me and you're shooting YouTube videos or you're shooting product videos or something like that, you need something that you can really easily grab and get maybe some B-roll shots in the situations. You don't want to carry all of your heavy gear with you. This definitely helps get you there and gets the job done. Now it does shoot to an SD card. You've got a small SD card in the bottom. I'll link to the one that I use, and it still uses the NP-BX1 batteries, which are okay. They're relatively small, but they last a long time if you're shooting photos. If you're shooting HD video, it does pretty good. If you're shooting 4K video, it does tend to kind of eat through those batteries a little fast, but the camera does charge up really easy using a micro USB cable right to the side. And then, like I said at the beginning, I have that bag and I keep an extra battery in there just in case I need to swap it out and don't have power. But the camera charges up relatively quickly, just plugging it into a normal cell phone charger, and then you're good to go. No problems there. Is it worth the extra couple $100? Now, the RX100 Mark V with the new version, the 5A, being something that we were more used to with the RX100 line, they kept the price point the same there. And then, of course, there's even earlier versions of the RX100 that are still fantastic cameras that have a lot of the features that you would really just need that you can get for several $100 less now. For example, the RX100 Mark IV is still a fantastic camera, and it's several $100 less than when it first came out. Even though standard Mark V is cheaper, and then of course with this version you're up over $1,000. So is it worth it? For me it is, because it has a few more of those pro features. I do like having that extended zoom range now that I've had time to spend with it. Being able to go to that full 200mm has given me a lot more flexibility that I guess I didn't realize I was missing out of my previous RX100s, because you don't really know what you're missing until you are able to use that feature for the first time. And once I started using the ability to zoom out beyond 70mm, I really kind of started to be glad that I had it, and it wasn't such a frustration to me anymore that I wasn't getting that f2.0 wide aperture that I was used to having on the previous versions. So I think that's going to do it for the video here on this camera. It's been a good buy. I've been glad that I've had it, and I think it's still a good buy here in 2019. I'll be interested to see whether or not Sony makes any changes to it. You know, this camera is a year old now, so maybe they will, maybe they'll wait another year. They're definitely busy updating other cameras right now. So if you're interested in that, make sure to subscribe to the channel here on Ditch Auto so that you can get those videos when they come out. But links to everything are in the description below, so you can check them out. If you do intend to buy this camera and you use the link in the description, our channel here gets a little bit of commission for that over on Amazon or B&H Photo, and I just really appreciate that. It helps keep our lights on here, it helps keep our camera batteries charged and all that good stuff. So thanks so much for doing that. And if you like this video or have any questions about the camera at all that I didn't address, make sure to let me know down in the comment section so that I could do my best to answer them. That's where I hang out with you guys after the video's over, so I'll do my best to answer any questions that I can down there. So that's going to do it for this video. Thanks so much for checking it out, and I hope to see you back here soon on Ditch Auto.